Hello and welcome to the Medtech Women Podcast. My name is Jess. I'm a Principal Staffing Associate at MDJ Partnered Solutions. We're a staffing solutions business supporting medical device and biotech companies globally. Having worked the market for 2 years now, I noticed the gender diversity gap, and I'm very passionate about helping women either enter the industry or really further their careers. This led me on to making Medtech Women by MDJ, where I work with companies that value diversity to place talented female professionals, and where I also created the Medtech Women Podcast. This is where I share knowledge, advice, and inspire confidence onto females just starting out their careers. Today I'm joined by Amy Russell, Director of Russell Regulatory Consultants, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today, Amy. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. So what I'd like to do is just take it very back to the beginning, and can you tell me a little bit more of what led you up to actually directing and being a founder of your own consultancy?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in medical devices for about 6 years now.
Okay.
And about 3 years ago, I started consulting or contracting. I had been working in my last perm role. I had been doing part of an MDR project and then a lot of day-to-day kind of reg activities, so kind of supporting on process and design changes, working on the MDR project as well, working on registrations. And I just kind of thought to myself, well, there's 3 or 4 contractors here working on just MDR.
Yeah.
I understand it, I could do that. And to be quite frank, they were being quite financially rewarded more than me. So yeah, to be really honest, that's also part of it. So I started talking to them about how they got into contracting. I got myself an accountant, and I started talking to recruiters that specialised in contract roles.
Okay, that's amazing. And so what you said, you've been in the medical device industry for 6 years now. So what initially drew you into it?
To be honest, like when people say they just fell into it, that's exactly what happens to me. I was working in academia, so I was finishing up a PhD down in Bristol, and I knew I didn't want to continue in academia. I didn't want to do a postdoc.
Yeah.
At the time, nobody ever mentioned medical devices to me. It was either continue in academia or go into the pharma industry, and I didn't have any pharma experience, so I was kind of at a loss, and I was probably a recruiter's nightmare, just applying for job after job with anything that said medical or health or science in the subject. And then eventually a recruiter contacted me and she said, I've got this job working for a notified body if you'd be interested. And I was like, what's that? But yeah, that ended up being for one of like the leading notified bodies at the time, and that was basically how it all started. That was when my learning curve started.
And during your PhD, did you have many women in your classes with you? Was it male dominated or?
So I was kind of doing a research PhD, so it was very mixed in the lab of men and women. And then I think in the medical device industry, and reg affairs especially, I think it's very mixed. I mean, going back to that kind of first role that I had, there were a lot of managers who were female. Even my first line manager was female. There was a lot of women in higher management, a lot of women auditors. So there were a lot of women around. But I don't think it's quite the same for the contractor kind of space. I think in my whole kind of 3 years working as a contractor, I've probably only met a handful of women contractors, and I'm not really sure why that is. It's probably like a confidence thing. I think, making a sweeping generalisation, men are a lot more willing to kind of jump into things and take risks and not overthink it. But yeah, I hope that changes. I have had a lot of ex-colleagues who are female who probably have more experience than I do, and they've asked me so many times about contracting and how you go about it, and you know, I've told them, but they just haven't taken that leap yet.
I think a lot of the time it's like work-life balance as well for women. If they've got families as well, I think it gets a bit tougher, but it shouldn't be that way. I think companies should offer more flexible working. But I know you mentioned that you had a lot of female managers. As you started your career, did you see any of them as role models? Did you have any female role models?
Do you know, it's a strange one because there were a lot of females around, but I think especially for that first role, I wasn't really thinking about like career progression or anything. I was just trying to get my head around this brand new industry to me. And to be honest, I still don't think I really have a role model, whether it be gender specific or not. I just kind of do my own thing and focus on my own goals, and I think that's important too.
Yeah. Okay. And you've already said that you feel like there's more male consultants and female consultants. Do you feel like you've seen a change over the years of more females stepping up, or do you think it's stayed the same?
I mean, I think it's probably stayed the same, to be honest. Okay. I know that there are, thinking about like permanent roles, there are a lot more schemes now, or more that I'm aware of anyway, especially in larger companies, to encourage women to get into kind of stereotypical male roles like engineering, which is great. So I've come across a lot of female engineers recently, but definitely not in the contractor space. I do hope that changes.
And do you think you know of anything that could be done to maybe improve that?
I think it's a lot about just kind of getting words out there and doing a bit of like engagement, and I think everyone's kind of responsible for that, recruiters and everyone really, about what it takes to be a contractor, because right now in the medical device space, there's so many opportunities. We're doing project-based things, for MDR and for IVDR in the next few years. So it's tailored for a consultant to come in and do that work. So, that's less of a risk there, if that's what the issue is for a woman thinking about will the work be there, because it definitely is.
Yeah. And has the last year impacted you at all? I know when we spoke before, you said you've actually probably been the busiest you've ever been.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I get contacted all the time. There are so many contracts going around, and I have to turn down a lot of work. In terms of, I don't think that COVID's really had an impact on even work-life balance for me before. Like the same week that we had the first lockdown, we was actually starting a new contract that was home-based. It was as if I had some premonition or something. But I quite like working from home, and that kind of whole working for yourself kind of aspect. I did a bit of it doing my PhD when I was writing that up, and I stayed focused, didn't put the TV on or anything like that. And I think there are a lot of distractions in a workplace. There's a lot of people on the phone, in meetings, taking calls and chatting, going for coffees, and I just like to kind of zone out and have quiet time. So it definitely works better for me. And I like to take a lot of breaks as well. I think it's important. So, the past year working from home, just going to the gym, taking the dog out at lunchtime, it's all really important just to clear your head. Yeah,
100%, I agree. So I know you touched on it briefly at the beginning, but what was your driving factors for you actually starting your own consultancy?
So I think, as I said before, I think it was the kind of epiphany that I had the knowledge and the ability to do it, especially with understanding the MDR in and out and kind of seeing the implementation. I knew that I could do that myself. And then it was kind of, that I knew the work was out there. I could see all the contracts being advertised on LinkedIn and things like that. And So I knew that there was a low risk there, that, you know, if I just took that first step, then I'm sure it'd be okay. And once you start chatting to recruiters and chatting to other contractors, you can see that in itself, you know. I don't think a lot of contractors in you know, the medical device space at the moment have a lot of free time or take a lot of holidays.
So you touched on the MDR and the implementation of the MDR. I know that was a massive thing over the medical technology industry. So what do you think some of the next big things are going to be within the industry?
So I think over the next probably 10 years, it will be the kind of digital technology space that will be the main focus. Some devices won't change at all, like a hip implant is always going to be a hip implant. But if there's any aspect of a device that can be automated with software or AI, I think that will happen, which, you know, represents its own challenges for someone working on regulations and trying to write a clinical evaluation for that. But so I think that will be the main focus, and then in the next few years, it's obviously IVDR as well, alongside MDR. So there's a lot of changes happening there.
And how do you keep on top of that, all the new regulations?
Just read it over and over again, and then work with. That's what I love about contracting, actually, is that you get to work with a lot of different clients, so you see how to approach things differently, and you see what works, what gets audited, and what comes back with a non-conformity or not. So it's a good opportunity to learn by doing.
That's good. So thinking about your whole career, what's one piece of like great advice that you've received that you've held on to?
I think just to kind of block out other people to a certain extent. You know, I sometimes talk about just putting like horse blinkers on and just kind of focusing on what you're doing and your goals, because, you know, although you can be happy for other people to see their success and achieve their goals, it might happen at a different time for you, or it might look a bit different. So like when I was doing my PhD, I was watching all of my friends and all my, you know, people that I'd gone to uni with really excel in their careers, buy new cars, go on fancy holidays, and I was broke. And I really felt like I was behind at that time. I think, you know, obviously now I've caught up, but it just, you know, it takes some time. So just focus on what you're doing. I think it's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the main factors in a lot of my podcasts, is that I think women tend to compare themselves to one another and don't see how successful they've already been. So what's one piece of advice you could give to maybe females just starting out their career, that maybe one day they want to start their own consultancy or company?
Just to go for it, to really like take every opportunity, to ask a lot of questions. I mean, that's like such a basic piece of advice, but I wish I had asked a lot more questions in my early career. And just go for it. Don't think that you're too early in your career or anything like that to do it, because you're probably not. You know, it's all about what your confidence is within yourself and your knowledge, and it's also not about knowing everything. I think that was a misconception that I had, that you know, I had to be an expert in every regulation and every device type and every standard, and it's really not the case. You just need to know where to look for it. So just go for it. Just don't make up reasons why you can't.
Okay, that's a good piece of advice. So is there any last words that you'd like to say? Any final comments? Anything else you would like to comment?
I mean, it's a bit off topic, but you know, I think that you'll have a lot of women coming forward and telling their stories, and you know, it's good for us all to understand, you know, if there is a kind of gender bias within the industry, and to really kind of get that vocalised. But I also think another topic that we need to discuss is resource within the industry, because I mean, I saw it back 6 years ago, and it's probably just getting worse as kind of the regulations get more stringent and, you know, the expertise dwindles. And I think we all could do with, doing some public engagement and really kind of, talking to our friends about it, because if there are people who, like me, were kind of in a position where they had done a biology degree and didn't really know what they wanted to do, there's a whole industry out there that I wasn't aware of that I'm sure a lot of other people aren't aware of either. And if there's a kind of resource gap, we should all be doing what we can to kind of fill that. From a kind of selfish perspective, I would love to say to someone, when asked what I do for a living, I work for the medical device industry and kind of regulatory and compliance, and for them not to kind of glaze over or conversation killer. I would love for them to say, oh yeah, my friend does that, or oh yeah, I've heard all the regulations are changing, are you involved in that? I'd just love it to be a bit more common, that people get and are aware of what we do, rather than it being a conversation killer.
I fully relate with that, even though I'm not in the industry, but where people ask me what I do, I'm a recruiter for the medical technology industry, and they just blank. So it's just like, it's just like, okay, don't worry. But thank you so much for your time today, Amy. I've really appreciated speaking to you, and thanks so much for coming onto the Medtech Women Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.